So one of the things we'll look through tonight is I went through and pulled off of Google Communities what people wanted. So we can look through that list and sort of check it off as we go or add to it.
When I write down you asked the 1, 2, 3 for the answer, but I didn't separate the 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
But if it
contains it all, I took that.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it didn't contain it all, then I asked people to sort of update it. But if it contained it all, that was fine. What I want from people from the class is to be able to answer the questions. I'm not so, need to be in a format that's readable, understandable, and that's presentable. But it doesn't have to be 100% like exactly, unless I say, put it this way, I don't really care, So we'll also talk about what's assigned and what's due, talk about, a discussion, article of the week, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper with software development methodologies. And if you watch the video from last week, it was about software development methodologies. And so we'll talk a little bit more about those. And then next week we're going to talk about how we map from, actually next week, Vasas Dawson, who's the other person who's teaching this course at the exact same time, he's going to take you for a class. And it's right across for Aaron, if you go out the store, straight across, his room's over there, and I've got the number on here. So the information from this lecture comes from a variety, and then sometime during this term, his students are going to come over and join us. And hopefully we'll find it during a period where we can do some real good discussion and interaction with them. Okay? Anyway, the lecture comes from a variety of sources, including your textbooks. There's a really good other textbook. It's getting a little bit old now, but it's got some really good information in it. It's by Richard or Dick Fairley. And so some of the stuff comes from that, and of course then websites. I take a lot of websites, and those will be cited throughout the presentation. What's assigned is the case study 1. I went through and sort of fixed up the schedule. If you go out and look at it on D2L, I updated the schedule a little bit so that the due date on this is, I think I gave you a little bit more room in between some of the assignments. Well, so that they didn't like case study, exercise 2 is due like next week, and I don't know. They were all sort of like on top of each other, and so I tried to separate it out a little bit. And so, but anyway, case study 1 is going to be due February 27th. So that's 3 weeks from now. Okay. It is a team project. You found it.
Did not find it.
I know, it took a while. If you need to move back or something, feel free. But if you want to sit in front of me, that's great too.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I've got room. You guys may not feel like you do. But anyway, case study number 1 is due. It is out there on the site in D2L in the area, and it's called JAMA Case Study, JAMA. It is a team project, basically 3 to 5 people. 3 is verging on too small, but is okay. 2 is too small. 5 is verging on kind of too big. Your sweet spot is like 4-ish, but it's up to you. How many you can get on it and how many you find. Please make sure that you include some of the distance students if you can. That's a good thing on your team. Yes.
So, there are very few people in the class, but I see a lot of people posting on the Google community. So, are they all distance students?
The distance students that you see that aren't named in this, that aren't in this classroom, are distance students. So, I think Irene's one, and there's a.
So this project will include just people from the classroom, or will it, or
Everybody's going to be doing this project.
a distance?
Yeah, they're doing the same thing you guys are. So they're involved in doing all the same assignments and everything else.
But should we work with them, or should we make the team change?
Both, if you can. Okay? So it's always good to include them because, like I said, there's some really interesting students out there, and they've got some of them have pretty good, cool jobs out there. And some of them are just in South Denver and didn't want to drive up here. So it all really depends upon who got signed up into which areas. But yeah, if you could have at least, sort of some crossover between in-class and online students, that would be good. One of the things it does, if nothing else, is to sort of show you what it is to have a distance team, because you sort of have to do that way. It's basically, there's some numbers in it that you're going to have to work with, and if they're wrong, don't get like wrapped up in them. It's more about figuring out what you do than it is making sure the numbers are 100% right. Okay? If you want to make the numbers right, that's great, but it's more about making sure that you know what to do in this type of thing. If you have it's one report from all of you. I'll have you put this up. Case study 1 will be put up at a Dropbox on D2L. It would be nice if all of you put up a copy, just because it makes sure that I can look through easily and see that everybody did it. And then I usually just read one, but it makes sure that it allows me to put comments for everybody in there so that you can see I can tell you what I saw. So everybody uploads it to D2L in a Dropbox. Next week, what's due is exercise 2. This is the one where you're thinking about a project and what went right, what went wrong. Sort of the same thing you do in an Agile retrospective. What things were good, what things were not so good, and what things would you do differently? Are you going to do differently next time? Okay? And I asked you when you look at it, to look at it not only from the viewpoint of the project itself, but any tools that you used or the project manager used, what worked and what didn't. Now, not all of you have done software project management or software development before. So if you haven't done software development before, pick a project you've been on, because we've all been on projects, whether it's been in a class or whether it's been in some job that you've had. Any project that you have, please use that and use how they communicated in that project for the communication. But like if you have been in software development, use that first, but if not, pick a project. Because some of you have been in hardware, some of you have been in other kinds of business, but like I said, everybody's done some sort of project somewhere, I think. Yes?
So project topic is due tonight, right?
Yes, and just email me.
So is there any example ideas? Could you provide some?
I didn't provide an example. Just sort of, is there a type of project, a type of thing that you want to do, or a topic that you'd like to do, and if there's any, and it doesn't have to be really long because you're going to turn in your midterm one pretty soon, but what you're thinking about, why do you want to do it? So I've had people say that they would like to look at the difference in software project management between a large company and a small company, or a large team and a small team. And if you've got do software project management for a team of 1, why is it of interest to you? Well, I develop research software, and it's only really a couple of us that do it. So is there practices I should be looking at? Yeah. So it's just tell me something along those lines in an email.
Can we change it
Yes.
afterwards?
Yeah. Yes. You certainly will be able to change it if you want to as you go along. Like I said, I really assume that there will be one or more of you that will do something completely different by the time you get to the end of it. One of the things that seems to happen is when people start interviewing their people, their interviewees, they get an idea from something they said and take off on a tangent and end up doing the project more about that. You may find that earlier when you're starting to research for your topic that you want, oh, this is more interesting, I'd rather do that. Or somebody brings up, that's fine, just let me know that you're switching it, okay? So, last week, what did you guys think? Was it interesting? Was it worthwhile hearing them talk? And not all of you have seen it yet. They're uploading it. They forgot to upload the panel. So it will be up there as well, along with the recorded lecture. But are there any other questions I can take back or answer from that you've thought about after listening to them talk, or anything you're interested in?
I posted something that I thought was interesting.
Relevant on the Google communities, yeah.
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 Because I feel like you hear a lot, especially today, about like outsourcing and there being like this downward pressure on price, like they say like a lot of times, like race to the bottom in regards to outsourcing. It was interesting to hear in this industry that it's actually kind of like a broader like race to the top.
Yeah. And prices are leveling. You know, it's sort of, you'd like to get the best prices. What you like to do is get the best prices for the highest, quality of somebody, use the best you can for the cheapest you can. It's always going to be the thing that the business wants to do. And if you can find those resources globally, that's great. What you find, though, is when you start doing that, then the other countries start raising their prices as they get to be known to be good, right? Good resources, they too raise their prices. So there's a leveling that happens there. This just allows us to actually do two things: find the best resources for it and get some sort of working 24 hours. We don't do a lot of that, but we do some of it. You know, if can always constantly be sort of, one of us is always on, one place or another. But yeah, exactly. It's nice to know that it's not all just about cheapest resources, although that was one of the things. Anything happened to you this week that you thought of? I mean, it's all up on Google Communities, but remember, every week, whether you talk in this class or not, Google Communities, it's a gimme. It's pretty much, did you do it or didn't you when I grade it, right? You get to drop 2, but you'd really not like to drop a 0 because, unless you planned on not doing it, right? So you'd rather make a plan for when you don't want to do it rather than just not, oh, God, I forgot.
The problem with mine was,
what was it?
I signed into the community with my like regular
email
account, which I hardly use anymore now that I have like a CU account.
Yeah.
And so I kept waiting for notifications to pop up on that, and I wasn't getting anything.
Yeah.
And I logged back into like my kind of normal business one, and of course that's where everything was.
Yeah. Well, if you need to sign up with the other one too, did you? Yeah, you did.
I've just got it set up to forward anything from Google Communities to my other one now.
Because if you need to, you can. Okay. Yes.
So regarding the discussion, so you said like this week there was no specific topic that we were supposed to discuss?
Most of the weeks there will be no specific topic. In the presentation that I recorded, I actually had something that you could discuss if you wanted to. But in general, there is no specific topic that I'm going to ask. There may be something I say in class that you'll want to discuss, but I'm really depending on all of you guys to come up with some interesting things that you run into, articles you'd like to talk about, points that came up, people you talk to, or whatever that have to do with software development and software project management. And in a lot of ways, that ends up being a whole lot more interesting than just me giving you a topic that everybody waves in on, because a lot of times those topics end up being, oh yeah, I agree with that too. or something along those lines. And I'd rather have you talking about, bigger, broader than just, oh yeah, I agree with that. As a matter of fact, that won't get points. Oh yeah, I agree with that. No. You have to say something of, add a point to something. Or bring up a site or something. Okay? Any other questions? Yes?
Do we need to initiate a topic like a discussion, or we can just participate in?
You can talk on somebody else's discussion is fine. It just needs to be something more substantial than, oh yeah, I agree with that. Or no, I don't agree with that. If that's all you do, then that doesn't do it. But if you come back and say, well, I think that this happened and I did this with my company and blah, 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 that solves it right there. Okay, so something that's a little bit more substantive. Yes, you're very welcome to use somebody else's, but don't be shy about bringing up your own topic as well. Okay? Okay, next week, like I said, Vasa Dasan's class, it's right across the way. It's an ECCE. Make sure you have that part, because if you don't, you'll be walking around from room to room to room saying, are you Vasa Dasan? Are you Vasa Dasan? No. 1B41. But from what I hear, it's right across go out that door, go across the courtyard in the other door, and it's right there. Okay? And like I said, and then sometime along this time, he'll have his class come over and join us. And those of you online, I'll get them to record. You're not there right now, I know that, but I'll get them to upload his lecture to our area as well, so that you'll be able to see that. Okay. Now, I want to go to this. Open. Okay, so some of the things that I wrote down from what we wanted. Good practices, it's really awful. Okay, good practices of software project management and correcting bad habits. Sort of, can everybody read that? I don't know if you can read that in the back. I could make it bigger. Always better. Okay. The history, inspiration, philosophy, and central points of software project methodologies so that you can determine which is the best one to use. How to solve issues that arise in projects. This comes up a couple of times it came up a lot actually, but I think it comes up in a couple of the places in here. Understanding of the different responsibilities and roles for project managers and how that fits into software development methodologies. Luckily, that'll happen in these next couple of weeks. Understanding different managerial styles and how software project management is different than management. We'll be talking mainly about software project management, but there'll probably be a little bit of that we'll talk about the regular management too. But it's probably going to be more software project management, but a lot of those things are translatable, really. Learning soft skills, communication and collaboration. Somebody knew how to make me happy talking about that. More about Agiles and the roles. Different methodology. This is a lot like the same different methodologies and pros and cons. The essential factors, which is kind of like good practices and habits, perhaps. Conflict resolution and effective negotiation. Who of you is good at negotiation? Are you? Good.
Good at bartering. I like to do this.
Oh yeah? You like that? Okay, well, we'll pull on your knowledge when we get to that point, I think, because you're always negotiating. When you're doing software project management, you're always negotiating with your stakeholders, because you can't do everything, and you can't satisfy everybody. So how do you make everybody happy at the end of the day? So there's two different types of negotiation. Are you win at any cost?
Sort of. I bought my first car last year, and it was like the most fun I've ever had in my life. But like at the end of the day, they stand me, and they've like never said another thing to me. And
They don't want you to buy a car from them again.
they never want to see me again. It was like documentary, and it was all about how like car dealerships actually make money. It's all based on numbers and like very little about how much they actually sell. And so it's all about like how many cars they sell before December 31st.
Mm-hmm.
And I started talking to them on like December 28th, and it's just like
there is that. Yeah. Yeah. When I bought a car, I got up and walked away, and they didn't.
Gotta walk away. Like it's,
I mean, I seriously walked away, and I was pulled back by the other person I was with, and I was like, I won't buy it at that. But yeah, they still made money at the car. I wasn't trying to screw them, but yeah. But at the other end, so they won. You weren't all about burning the house down. You were like, they were winning too.
No.
Yeah, they were winning too because they sold a car.
They sold the car, yeah.
And that's what their goal was. One of their goals was, right? So we'll talk about negotiation, because a lot of what we're going to talk about with negotiation is how not to burn the house down when you do it. Because you can. There are times you do that. But it'll be really hard to get the software done after that, or anything else. They'll never ask you back to buy another car.
Yeah. I think the dealership won. I think the guy that sold it to me lost.
There, see? Conflict resolution, that's a big thing. Again, you can't be all things to all people. You can't make everybody happy. So how do you solve two team members having a fight? That's a good one. How to get everybody on the same page is huge. Buzzwords, correct terminology, that's kind of the same thing as that base knowledge about software project management. Difference about each of the methodologies. Somebody needs a job. So how do I get enough that I can go in and do a good interview? That's good, actually. That's what we want you to do. How to become a good manager. What does a successful career look like? How do you maintain a balance between quality and getting things done? Because there are times you're going to send things out that isn't 100% quality. Is that okay? Okay. Handling large or small teams, ad hoc requests from your people, your stakeholders. What do you do with those? Be careful of taking a newbie into the room, particularly technologists who people say, well, could you do this? Oh yeah, that's easy. You pretty much just gave away something. It's straightforward, perhaps. Nothing's ever, well, some things are easy. But as soon as you say that in a room with your stakeholders, you've already agreed to do it. Oh yeah, that's easy. I can do that. But enough of those, oh yeah, that's easy, I can do that, and all of a sudden you're over scope, way over scope. A lot of extra time. And so you have to be careful and figure out how your team can get all on the same page to say the right things. When you make sure you do that. Resource management, getting the most out of a team, adding value. There's a lot of team things in here. There's also, again, work-life balance for the team. So there's a lot of team stuff, a lot of basics in here, a lot of team stuff, and then a lot of communication, negotiation, conflict resolution, which is all communication, how to adapt, etc. So we'll keep that list in mind as we go through. If there's anything that you want to add to it, let me know, and we'll make sure that we sort of get through it all before we get done. Okay. So, 2 articles of the week. One of them is from, 2013. But, I like it. It's about the way that you design office spaces today is highly cubicle-oriented, right? Where some places even have just long tables. You sit together and you do the stuff, right? I mean, they've been doing that for a while. They've gotten more and more and more that way. It actually has a lot of downside to it. There's a lot of upside. Go ahead, you can eat. Just be careful of the speaker in front of you. They're going to get all that on tape, and then so. It actually turns out that the unintended downside is that there's a lot of interruption, right? Because you're sitting on a long table with somebody will stick up their head and, hey, guess, blah, blah, blah. Know what I did? Or how about this? It's so easy to get in touch with you. And if you look at this small graphic at the bottom, in general in an office, there's only about 12 minutes and 40 seconds that anybody actually works on a task before they get interrupted. And then often it's about 25 minutes and 26 seconds is the average time elapsed before returning to work on the same task. So I've worked for 12 minutes, almost 13 minutes. Something interrupts me. It takes me 25 and a half minutes to get back to my task, right? Then there is about 15 minutes on average of resuming a difficult task to get back into the same level of concentration. So if it's really, really tough, and somebody interrupts me in 12 minutes, 12 and a half minutes, and it takes me 25 minutes to get back to it, and then it takes 15 minutes for me to get back into it, I've been interrupted before I got back into it, right? So sometimes that's why we all get up and go someplace really quiet when we have something we're really trying to work on, because it's really hard to get back to that same level of thought. 2.8 seconds is the length of interruption required to cause one study habits to commit twice the number of computer errors. So study subjects. So you only have to have a 3-minute interruption to start making errors. 63% of tasks are interrupted when people are in open plan office, and only 49% of tasks when you're in an office, sort of your own office. So you get more done when you have a door.
So this is something I've experienced personally. For instance, during my internship, there were 15 interns, and we all were put in the same conference room. So, I mean, we got the work done, but even I have noticed the big push, and I don't really understand what kind of evidence they have to suggest that there is not enough interaction, because there's really stand-ups and people do interact. So I find it hard to see what exactly they are trying to achieve. But this is something I've seen myself. So yeah, I'm pretty much a fan.
This is one of those things that's real apparent when you sit in those situations. When I worked over in Switzerland, we all sat at these really long tables that were wide. So I sat on one side, somebody sat on the other side there, and then they also sat on either side of me. And you really had to figure out how to really focus. But I got to say, you were there long hours because you got so little done. And that's one reason that often of us will work 40 hours a week, is because you're interrupted a lot. And to get your job done, you're there a long time, right? And then you get tired because you're there a long time, so you get interrupted more easily. So it's sort of this, revolving type of thing. It's a hamster wheel that's hard to get out of. I find that working at home's a whole lot better because I don't get interrupted the same way. Although if I am trying to deal with that, sitting is now the new cigarette smoking deal. I try to get up and walk around when I'm on conference calls, which means that, that dish needs to be washed. So I interrupt myself. So it's sort of, you get into some of that type of stuff when you work at home.
Procrastination, that whole thing.
I don't have that problem. No, it's generally if I get up to walk around to feel healthier, all of a sudden somebody's going, "What's that water in the background?" Oh, shoot.
Something to drink.
So, remember to go on mute while you're doing it. But the second hour of the week was from January, just a few weeks ago. But why telling a joke pays off for a boss. find that they actually find in several studies that leaders who tell jokes are seen as more competent and more confident. So even they did set up a bunch of people in everything from sort of presentations to job interviews to other types of interactions, and the people that told a joke while they were doing it to the people that they were talking to were seen by the people they were talking to as being more confident, being better, being more interested, sort of this, somebody that they would actually rather be on their team if you tell a joke, which isn't hard to kind of figure because all of us like to be on teams with bosses that seem to have a sense of humor. Even if it's a bad sense of humor, you'd rather be on their team than somebody that just seems stern or monotone or something like that. But a lot of times, for example, the people that would make a joke in an interview would be more likely to be remembered and hired. So and they said even bad jokes seem to be okay. So it didn't seem to bother people when it was a bad joke. So remember to bring some levity when you go in. You might want to think of something that you can sort of say that makes people chuckle when they talk to you, or when you start off a presentation. That's why the joke at the beginning of a presentation, but in an interview, don't just look like you're afraid. Make a joke. And actually, making a joke does make you more confident too, as well. And don't worry about if it's bad, because they don't care. They may groan, and then they'll go ahead and ask you other things. So let's go deeper with some of the Agile and other methodologies. Today's landscape, again, it's competitive. The world's competitive. It's getting more competitive. You can just screw up so easily. Think of how quickly Uber screwed up over this past weekend, right? And did you hear about that?
No.
Yeah. Over what they did is the taxi drivers were striking because of the ban, the immigration ban, and they were only striking for an hour, for a short period of time. And Uber sent out something like, well, they're striking, ride with us, and which pissed off a lot of people, and they lost a lot of business. People deleted their app, started taking Lyft. I mean, a lot of blowback. So Uber's come out now and they're totally on, trying to support the new. But what happened? It was poof, business at the speed of light, right? Because people are connected now, or get something, or somebody tells them something. But it's competitive, it's quick, it's fast. You have to do it really quick. You have to pivot quickly. They came back really quickly with how they were going to respond to it, although I think somebody at Uber lost their job over it. I mean, a high-up guy lost their job over the whole thing. So it's a scary, scary business out there, and clients' expectations have not gone down, they've only gone up, right? There's a lot of team instability. Your team members, people travel more, they're in and out. There's, millennials, I hate to say, they're getting better, but change jobs often, and so you don't know if they're going to be there tomorrow. You might have them today and they may be gone tomorrow. It's getting better, but near-time development requirements, there are a lot of things right now that we're trying to program about where we're looking for real-time issues. Security. You have to have real-time systems that are looking for people that are trying to break into your computer systems, right? That are trying to break in. So you have a whole lot of real-time monitoring that's happening, and you need to be watching for those things. Really urgent bugs, because if you're reliant on technology, if you're Uber and you're reliant on the app working to get a ride, so, the next gig out of it, if you have a bug in that software that's been downloaded recently, Uber's screwed, right? And technical debt. How many of you know what technical debt means? Or use the term? You want to answer it? What's technical debt?
It's things that you know are wrong in your system, things that are probably going to have to be addressed eventually, but also not like number one priority.
Yeah, a lot of those things keep falling to the bottom of the priority list, right? We need to do that, but we'll get to it later. And if you continually get to it later, there's a point where things are not going to work as well unless you do it. And it accrues. And it gets worse and worse and worse because not only that one piece, but more and more things grow from it. And when you go back and fix it, it may impact huge amounts of things because you have a whole bunch of technical debt to get to.
I feel like that's prerogative I've noticed more often with PMs. PMs, at least in my experience, are less likely to prioritize technical debt over features or that kind of thing.
Why?
Because of probably how they get evaluated. They're evaluated on deliverables, and it's way easier to sort of like justify your contribution if you're saying, oh, the shiny new feature that my team got implemented versus, look at this problem that's only a problem 1% of the time, or
exactly.
Could have been a really big problem, but it's really like unlikely that a user would have actually found it,
Exactly right. And your stakeholders are the same thing. What they're don't care about, they want all the features implemented. If I can ignore that other stuff, I want to, but then they'll trip over it, and things will blow up, and it's like, why didn't you take care of that? And things can, if you always are always putting it off, it can get worse and worse and worse. So we've learned with Agile that in reprioritizing things causes technical debt to accrue. So you can go out to this link and read about what they originally said about technical debt. They put it in a lot of good words like entropy and neologic, I think, was one of the words in the discussion. But it was OOPSLA. Does anybody know what OOPSLA is? Object-oriented. What? Systems. So it was sort of like the object-oriented is sort of like doing modular, right? Writing modular code. But back in '92. So think about, and we'll go out to this website, but let's talk about some recent software issues that were in the news. And I want you guys to think about sort of a couple of you sort of team up, so 2, 3, 2, sort of, to talk about, sort of imagine that you are managing one of these efforts. And which of the issues do you think you're going to be trying to deal with first, why, and how? And then what are your priorities? What do you do first? And what do you do next? Okay? It's interesting, this website is called Software Fail Watch. They release it by quarters when they see software failures. And so in Q3 of last year, they collected 380 software fail stories up through then, and 114 were in Q3 alone. They came from all sectors, from government, there's transportation, etc. But anyway, there are a number of different sort of, we'll look at some of the top ones they have here. So Solar City was Tesla just bought them, right? Anyway, they was a $400 million error. I don't know if you guys remember that piece. But they retained an investment bank to assist in that sale to Tesla. And after the $2.6 billion agreement had been signed, they discovered that they had undervalued Solar City by roughly $400 million. That means that the owners of Solar City got approximately $400 million less than what they should have when they sold, right? It was too late for the shareholders, although Tesla did make up some of the difference in stock. By the way, did you know that Tesla's owner, Musk, his brother is in Boulder and has the kitchen?
Oh.
Yeah.
The kitchen?
Yeah. The restaurant, The Kitchen?
Oh.
So one of my favorite restaurants. I love that restaurant. But he's the owner of that restaurant. So you can go in there and go, yeah, I'm close to...
His brother's the owner of Solar City too, right?
I think so. I think that, yeah. But, okay, so in this one, there was financial damage, there was some brand damage, there was no bodily damage. But what, if you were doing that, what would you do? So here is more than 1,500 BNZ customers' confidential information compromised in a data glitch. So, Bank of New Zealand. So a woman got an email from the Bank of New Zealand giving to her a stranger's bank account names, balances, available credit, and more. She called somebody and they said, found out that, oh, she wasn't the only one calling in. And it turns out that 1,500 people got the wrong information through a computer glitch. So that one's maybe financial damage, but more brand damage, right? Okay, and I'm going to get... Here's one. Kansas family sues mapping company for years of digital hell. Somebody in Kansas filed a lawsuit against Macmillan for mapping over 600 million IP addresses onto their rural farmhouse. Well, they specialize in mapping IP addresses with specifically geographic locations. If they couldn't figure out the location, they mapped it to this default address, which was this place. The result: the police were always knocking, looking for missing persons, hackers, thieves, stolen vehicles, child abuse, kidnapping, suicide. Always trying to figure out what was going on with his family, poor family out there. It's been going on for 5 years for them to, at this point. Nobody's done that. There's also a default in some geographic, by the way, some GPS software that sort of, they are making a joke now. They're calling it an island out in the ocean somewhere, but it's mapped to some point out in some ocean where so everybody's giving it a name and fake people because and if you can't get to the address in a GPS thing, then you go to this point. It's sort of they just map it to a default. So there's financial damage here. There's certainly brand damage, if you knew who Macmillan was, but there's also bodily damage. I mean, if you have police knocking down your door because they think you might, although you would have figured they'd figure it out pretty damn quickly, right?
Yeah. It's always the same now.
Yeah, exactly.
About the Solar City one, what was the relation with software glitches? I didn't get that because it's a valuation problem, so it's a bank issue, right? I mean, what is the...
You don't know. Did they do it most people do valuations these days with software. Whether they're using, they might have written a software valuation package that they're using. They might be using Excel, but they'd certainly have it mapped out. They'd already have it written out so that it would figure that out. Now, could it be an error in that? Yes. It could be an error in what somebody, I didn't even look at a whole piece of the company. But I'd have to dive deeper to figure out where it was in it as a software issue. But I would assume if they put it in here, that it very well could be they double counted debt, some high profile miscalculations in their software. So yeah, there's a couple of different things that led to that error. And then we all know about GM and their airbags, which really brought down Takata, right? Because they were the ones that had, actually not just there, but global leader. But it basically escalated. So there's financial, brand, and bodily damage. So let's talk about one of them. Which one is the most interesting that you'd like to talk about?
Kansas families.
The Kansas farmhouse? So you guys want to talk a little bit about what you would do? If you were the person that owned this project, or if you were Max Mind, what do you do? What do you do first? What do you do next? So, 2, 3, 2, 2. And you get 5 minutes. That's it.
I guess you disable that feature immediately.
The mapping company, what should we do?
Everything is okay.
Yeah, exactly. Or
So what would you guys do?
So the $75,000 is
Uh-huh.
for 5 years separate. Right. They asked for that for 5 years.
Yeah.
So is it reasonable to ask that much? Because they didn't report it immediately, right?
Well, they didn't report it immediately because they didn't know what was going on. So, if you're sitting out, if you're probably not completely technical, if you're sitting in a farmhouse in Kansas, then you're there because you're close to your father or whomever's in the nursing home, right? And so you don't know all that from here, but they may be incredibly technical, but I'm guessing they weren't. So all of these things are happening to them. They're getting all these letters. They're getting all this stuff that's, not good stuff happening to them. You wouldn't know. Why is it happening? They don't know. Nobody's telling them that I'm knocking down your door because your IP address was mapped to this location.
Right.
Right? So you don't know why it's happening. So it took them 5 years to figure it out. Somebody finally researched it and came up with what was going on. So I don't think $75,000 is a lot of money. It barely pays for whoever it is in the nursing home. But what would you do as this company? What do you do? You own the project. What do you do?
It already happened, right? So I think the only thing I can do is make them feel better, so maybe buy them a dinner.
Buy them dinner. So how do you fix it? How do you have to go make sure it doesn't happen again? How do you do it?
I think the most important thing is to decrease the brand damage. So I sort of agree with Chris' opinion to
Okay.
Do some tricks on it.
Yeah.
So maybe we can add a button to make the user report the precision mistake to the company on their kind of website interface. Then the company will know that, oh, some bad case happened, but they will do some investigation on these bad cases and find this kind of mistake.
You guys have an idea?
So I would suggest a couple of things. First would be, like, seems like a pretty egregious error to me if you are one of those companies who are responsible for it, that basically you let it happen for 5 years. So one thing I would definitely recommend to whoever is responsible is like major investigation, like why it happened. And seems to me that the company has some major oversight issues, like people are not really monitoring. That is one thing that which I would do, like looking to overhaul the whole system. Like, is there monitoring? Are there like operations people who are looking into it? But at the same time, like adding to the point of Uber, that I would basically set up a PR campaign to make sure that whatever I'm doing is being presented to people, because as you said, these days just one issue can cost company a lot. So I will make sure that whatever I'm doing is being reflected in the media, because that might seem like a lot of numbers. I would think along the lines of these two things.
Okay. You guys, I'll come back to it.
We'd probably look into the matter and see if there is nothing else that is being done. Means there is no such another place which is having such a problem. First you go through the technical aspects, only then you can go to the media and say that this is what we have done to make amends for what was done in the past. As for the family, you can't help it. What is done is done. If they are suing, then they'll have to go to court. You can't help that. Or negotiate some terms that we'll take care of the person in the hospital or whatever that is. But primarily, you see to your technical aspects of your company's, it's a website. So I believe that you first go into what went wrong and then make amends and see that nothing else goes wrong on those same lines. Because if somebody else comes up with a case on that same topic, it's going to be very bad for the company. So as I was saying, the website is still on. It's not like they shut down or it's not running. But I think they must have done something on that lines itself to see that nothing else goes wrong in the future.
Yeah, because you could imagine that they might have in every country they might have a place that they map it to, right? An IP that they map it to or whatever as a default. For one of the things that, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, like, have some sort of, like, open feedback system, like, in the website where, like, issues like these are escalated to the top levels right away, because it's already happening. Like you were saying, like, if it happens again, it's a PR nightmare at that point, because the company comes off as being very irresponsible towards people and not really be listening to what were the mistakes that happened before. So it has to be, like, a really good feedback system with highest priority for the same case again.
So how many of you think that just by fixing the mapping of the IP address to not their farmhouse is going to end all the troubles that farmhouse has?
They'll take care of most of it. I mean, it'll prevent new inquiries from reaching the farmhouse.
Yeah.
And whatever's existing in terms of law enforcement, that can probably be relatively easily corrected by just contacting the proper authority.
Yeah, where it ends up being an issue is all the, let's see, what they said was, there's the plaintiffs back then, so it wasn't just police who turned up on the Arnold's doorstep. Angry business owners would turn up claiming someone at the residence was sending their business thousands of emails and clogging their computer systems. Other people became convinced that someone living there was responsible for internet scams. How quickly does that stuff go away?
Slowly. That's why you gotta broadcast your solution. That's why you gotta I think really own up the responsibilities on it.
Yeah.
And try and put a positive spin on it by making, if you can get them on board, then there's gonna be additional rewards, like maybe even get to do like appearances or something, be like a minor celebrity. You can say like, this place in Kansas officially like the worst place on the internet or something like that,
I don't know. That seems like a lot of work, and I don't know if that's going to reach everybody, because if the scammers keep using that, I mean, I don't know how available. I think you just kind of just put a sign on their property that says, hey, if you're coming here because you traced my IP address to this location, this company screwed up and they acknowledged it. If you'd like to continue, trespassing on our property, we're insured by Smith & Wesson here.
Whatever.
And they can actually start doing all of those scams because no one will suspect them after that. It's like a win-win.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, go out and sometimes, look at these things and figure out what would you do in these situations. How would you fix things? You could see, and if you go back and look at what different companies did to fix things, you can see who did a good job and who didn't. Did Samsung do a good job with their batteries?
Yeah.
They kind of did. Everybody thought it was great when they pulled it all back and did a great recall and everything like that, but then they did happen again, right? So,
yeah.
and it turns out that they still don't know why the batteries are bad. They have no idea why the batteries are bad. Nobody can tell you. It's just sort of like it's complexity. They just have it's just too big. They don't know. So it's sort of they can't solve that problem, really weirdly enough. So they kind of did a good job, but then they didn't do a good job. So it's sort of, how do you do a good job when you get caught into that situation? And most of you are not, when you get into a bad situation with software, are probably not going to be live, global, out to the public. There's a good chance that it's just going to be in your company. But if something goes bad in some software you wrote that impacts your company financially or bodily harm or whatever, and then it gets outside, how do you, as the project manager, handle that? How do you work on making sure that it's getting fixed and people go on and keep believing in you? It doesn't happen often, but it certainly can happen enough that your reputation, your brand, it can hurt you. Okay? Okay. Why don't we take a break and then we'll go on with talking about iterative agile extreme methodologies. Okay? Iterative agile extreme methodologies. Okay. As you probably saw me talk about in the last lecture, right? All of you. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in these methodologies, and it's a wide variety of different methodologies that make use of the iterative sort of agile sort of things. You could see prototyping for user interface. A lot of times you'll do it for technical issues. Researchers will use iterative types of programming because you don't know the answer, right? You're trying to come up with the way to analyze data or a new algorithm. Yes? Oh, you're right. I don't have it on. You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, I yell well. Okay. A lot of times it's done to produce weekly or monthly, more often weekly or bi-weekly sorts of builds of product capabilities. That's a real useful thing for a variety of reasons, from everything from failing fast to see where the problems are and so that you can fix them, from that to being able to get software out in front of people and get your ROI, which we'll talk about in a few weeks, which is return on investment. Try to get that up, get money coming in. But there's a wide variety of reasons why you do it. Also to include your clients, and sort of there's of course, the mitigate risk factors, or fail quickly and fix it, fail forward. The advantages: continuous integration, verification, validation. You're constantly finding out whether you have any problems and doing it quickly. You get to do demonstrations of progress, which sounds like a negative, but the positive part of that is you're getting your clients more on board, your stakeholders, the people that you're trying to help with their expectations. They're seeing what you're doing, and and if it's done behind a big wall, they're imagining much better things than you probably produce. So if you get it out there quickly, then they start to see how things come out, and they have a better expectation. Early detection of defects, a systematic or incorporation of rework, et cetera, et cetera. Iterative models are, it's repeated cycles. So an iterative approach is step-by-step revision of, in addition to, and it includes those requirements, the design, the code, testing, and everything else. Right? When you do testing, though, in this case, you're going to be testing a lot. It's not just testing the piece you're coding now, but you have to devise a set of tests that's continually testing everything you did. And so you're doing automated tests often for this type of thing. So an incremental sort of build, validate, and validate sort of cycle would be sort of looks something like this, where you're constantly sort of going back to the level of, above it, and getting things right on each one and verifying it as you go along. An incremental build, the emphasis on that is the implementation, verification, and demonstration cycles. In an Agile sort of model, your emphasis is customer involvement. So if you don't have customer involvement in Agile, you're not doing Agile, really. You might be following the ideas of Agile, but the whole idea about Agile is customers and a lot of interaction and working with them. So if you're not working with them, you're not doing Agile. Evolutionary is really exploratory development. So you get into evolutionary models when you're thinking about doing research, or you don't really know quite what you're doing, and you're putting things together sort of in the dark. Spiral model is really for risk management. You'll hear about the spiral model a lot when you get into things like the DoD. If they're not doing waterfall, they're probably doing a spiral, because it mitigates risk. The design and development is really prioritized in an incremental build, and each build adds capabilities. For partitioning, and this is sort of a chart or a table of the obvious. If you're doing a project that's safety critical, you want to do the safety features first. If you are doing security critical, you want to design the security layers first, right? If it's user intensive, do the user interface first and work with the user UX, right? But it's that type of thing. Like I said, it's sort of the Captain Obvious table. If you're doing a certain type of project, look for the type of methodology that will allow you to prioritize that type of project. Rework is typically 30 to 50% of a team's time is spent on rework. Do you believe that, you software developers? It might be low. Yeah. So basically, all the work to fix an application after it's delivered to a customer is rework. If you actually talk about it like sort of as a maintenance sort of thing, 80% of software is probably rework and upgrades. After 80% at any rate, of a software's life cycle is in maintenance, rework, and whatever. You should plan it into your cycle so that you can try to avoid it as much as possible. You should plan for your technical debt. You should plan for your rework. So there could be anything from evolutionary, which is where there's requirements changes, a retrospective rework, so where you've actually done a really bad job at designing to begin with. And a lot of times when you get into Agile and you're delivering things every 2 weeks, your architecture can take a hit because you're prioritizing things and new things come up, new requirements come up, and databases have to change. The architecture of the interface may need to change, but a lot of things end up having to be changed, and that's a lot of retrospective types of things you have to go back and do. And then there's corrective rework, which is just plain old bad coding. Screwed up the, errors introduced when somebody was bugging you. When they took your mind off that really hairy problem and you came back and you forgot what you were doing and you put in a bug. And by the way, your boss doesn't care. He doesn't care that he bothered you and so you screwed up. Doesn't care. So in iterative development guidelines, you want to, basically you build an official demonstration version or release frequently based on that schedule. If you have one for your clients, for example, I have my team do demos to me a lot more often than that we do it for our stakeholders. And they also set up a sandbox so I can look at stuff and I can go out and accept things and play around with it and test it and all that type of thing. One of the things that I found that in having the developers demo it to me, they're actually thinking more through the app themselves because they have to think about how it works and how to present it and how to make it work. And that makes them think about what is happening there as well. And I get fewer questions when we do that than when they just release code, I put it together in a demo and demo it to the client. We do build upon priorities and the criticality of features. We're constantly talking about with my clients, which are internal clients. I'm constantly talking about what's the priority, what's critical to get out in a MVP. How many, and all of you have heard of the terminology MVP, right? Minimum viable product.
What product?
Minimum viable product. What is the least amount of features or functions you can do to release that's worthwhile to your client? Okay? So they are taught to think about in selling it to their client, what's the smallest thing that they can do to sell to their client? And then from there, we'll add things as the client say, oh, I need this. Or we figure out, oh, we need to do this. But in the case of the minimum viable products that we do, we leave off a lot of the admin stuff because we can do that behind the scenes. The developers can upload that. We get out the client-facing stuff as much as possible because that's stuff that they need to use. But we try to make it the smallest possible and then build out from there.
If you're like a startup and you just want to get, you're afraid of like waiting too long to release an idea, so you outline your MVP, you release something. Are you ever concerned that you might release something that then, somebody else does? Well, one of the giants looks at it and they can easily get to your MVP point and then something else. So like is MVP supposed to account for not just viable, that it would make money if no one competed with it, but that it's got a sufficient head start that you can't just like get smothered? Yes.
You have to think of it as if you're a real product manager, you're thinking of all of that. What can I release that's the smallest thing I could do that I could sell, A, and B, that nobody else can quickly pick up. And sometimes you'll be selling it to companies that are in NDA with you, so they can't talk about it. So you're doing it, you might do something that could quickly be picked up by somebody else, but that it would be hard for anybody to know about because you're only doing it with specific clients. And they're legally obligated not to talk about it.
In the case that you're releasing like an industry solution versus like a public-facing thing?
Right. If I'm going, and if you're angry birds, they got out something that was really absolutely minimal, small, and could have been easily replicated, and was quickly by a bunch of, but it got it out there, and there was, made everybody laugh, and it was such a splash that everybody played it, right? So there's things you take into account that, is it easily replicated? Yes. And there are some tools that we sell that are easily replicated, but we're the 800-pound gorilla. You know, we are not software developers, but because we're releasing it, the stuff that we're doing has so much of our expertise behind it that it would be hard for a small company to come along and do it because they don't have that expertise. So there's a lot of things you come into that you throw into your decision about what are those priorities and critical things. Depends upon where you're releasing it, who you're releasing, blah, 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 blah. Yes. At each point, though, you should be doing a review and testing of each version with your clients or users. Make sure that they're, you know, is this right? Is this what you wanted? Is this working the way that you expected? So that you can, and so after about the fourth week or second sprint, we start having do a sprint demo with our client at the end of every sprint to ask those questions. So we can start to get feedback and make sure that when we release it finally, it doesn't have it doesn't, you know, it's not a surprise. We don't have to go through endless end user testing. It's basically what they want. If redesign is more than 20% of the effort after about 2 builds, you need to rethink it. You know, you need to redesign it, you need to redo it, you need to whatever. If you're starting to find out that you're getting more feedback that's negative than positive after a couple of sprints, redesign it, rethink it, figure out if you're building something they didn't want. So again, why is it cool? Because there's a lot of validation. You only get done what people really want. Corporate changes can make trade-offs. This one's a big thing. It's better to be done with 80% of features rather than 80% complete with 100% of features. What does that mean?
Everything you've done so far is like absolutely correct rather than having all the things out mostly correct.
Mm-hmm. If the customer asks the 10 thing, I can make the 10 thing if it is not 100% working. So.
Yeah. So it's better to get the stuff complete that are important, right? And if you look at software, 50% of the stuff that gets written never gets used. Okay? It's a lot of waste. We write a lot of software that nobody ever really uses. So if you can get stuff written, 80%, 80% of the features done, 100% of the way, you're going to probably have a way better product, as long as it's the right 80%, than you are if you get, only 80% through the features and only partially done with each one of them, right? Do the stuff that's important. Evolutionary, and that includes working on this class. Do the stuff that's important, right? Evolutionary models, they're used when a stable first vision of the requirements cannot be specified. I don't know where we're really going with this. I've never really done it before. Nobody's ever really done it before. When they were shooting rockets up to the moon, okay, when Tesla guy, Elon Musk is trying to shoot that rocket. Now, some of it's been done, but it's completely done. It's done different in the fact that you're going to have people sitting in comfort seats, right, first class or whatever, and their rockets look different. And so, how do you get that up there? Well, I have to do a whole bunch of sort of cycles to figure that out. And I have to do sort of, it's an evolutionary sort of build, right? In each cycle, you're going to have a bit of each, you do the whole thing, whole piece of it, but you're going to do a lot of cycles and shoot it off and see if it works, and then shoot it off and see if it works. Hopefully it works sooner rather than not because it's expensive, but you're trying to get, the quickest way to get to figuring out what you're doing is to get stuff out there. When your requirements aren't known, we do this a lot in Agile too. We don't really know what they, again, that's one of the things that we talk about with Agile is it's a really good thing, but in reality, most Agile projects, you know what your requirements are. But because a lot of it's made, Agile's used a lot for ongoing product development or maintenance or something like that. So it's easier than when Agile's not as easy when you don't know exactly what you're going to get at the end, when you're doing it for the first time. But evolutionary models really are for that. You can't really talk about what the scope is because you don't know when you're going to get there. You can't really talk about what the cost is because you don't really know until you get there. And so all of it's sort of going to be done in these small cycles where you're sort of iterating to the goal. You end the project when you can sort of say, oh, okay, now we understand what those requirements are. We understand what this is. Now we can trade it into an incremental approach and actually start building out the stories because we know what we're doing now. But in an evolutionary model, again, often you don't know what it is because you've never done it before. For example, how about the first time they made an iPod, right? How many, or the first time they did sort of a, what was the first Apple sort of iPod thing called?
iPhone Touch
What?
or whatever.
What?
iPod was first.
Yeah, no, there was something before that Apple came out with. And my friend had it. No, it was sort of, it was a handheld thing, big, fat, heavy. I'll look it up and I'll remember it.
Was it the Newton?
It was, yeah. It was called the Newton.
Yeah, and it had a stylus and all that stuff.
Yeah, it had a stylus, and the really cool tech kids on the block had one.
Yeah.
You know, but boy, is it heavy and bulky and all that. But think about it. Nobody had done it before, right? So what did they get? Is they got something that was, you know, and as they iterated through the first iPod, nobody knew what it was going to look like or knew how it was going to work. And you got a wide variety of things that came out that were kind of like it. And then they settled into the iPad sort of tablet sort of world. But it was, there's a whole lot of iteration on those things when you don't know what you've got. So the project is then when you can convert it to the incremental approach. Or you cancel the project because you're never going to get there. You really don't know what you want, and you're never going to know what you want at this point in time. Or the client likes it and says, I'll take it as it is because I can get enough out of it. There are times when you don't have to make a really full product out of something. It can be enough that can make the client get the money back in return that they need to get for it. There sometimes is enough that you don't have to do anything more, right? You want to use a sort of an evolutionary when it's high risk and you really don't know what you're doing. Spiral approach, and like I said, this is a high risk, this is a model for risk, and oftentimes you'll see the DoD or others use this to mitigate risk. It's really a meta-level model for the iterative development. And so you take each one of the phases as you go along and you sort of revise it, refine it, and at each passing of the spiral. And you'll see the spiral done as a picture where it looks like a spiral. And in each spiral, you'll determine the objectives and alternatives and constraints. And you go through this process. Because it is for risk. It is to mitigate the risk and to make things, you know, you will sit down and at step one, really determine what are those objectives, alternatives, and constraints. Identify the risks, and then choose the alternative that you're going to use. Implement it, and then evaluate it. And then you go and do that again until you get to the end project, the end product. There's the spiral. This is what it looks like. So you kind of start, do your risk analyses, and you basically determine your objective, do your risk analyses, do your concept of operations, you integrate, you test, and you keep doing it until you get out to the end where you release. But by looking at each one of those steps, and you don't pass each one of those steps that we had before, you have to do each one of those. By doing that, you can really, really mitigate risks. Because you're being very, very careful about making sure you're choosing the alternatives that's the best alternative for this next pass. Okay? So they were doing all of that stuff before they went Agile. They were doing iterative, they were doing incremental, they were doing spiral, they were doing evolutionary before they got to talking about Agile. When we came out back in, used to use the XP, which is one of the first Agile methodologies, but they didn't call it Agile then, right? Agile came out because a bunch of guys got together, and it was a bunch of guys, by the way, got together and sat down, and they came up with what they call their manifesto, where they said that individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. Okay? Making sure I talk to my client, making sure that we have, because a lot of projects were done where the project manager and the business analyst were the only two people that talked to the client. And the developer sat back in a room and got these buckets full of requirements and implemented it, and they have a question, and then we'd go ask the client and then come back and tell them. And by the way, that was all done at the beginning of the project, and then you didn't see the client again until the end of the project, unless they wanted to tell you they needed more requirements, and so then you were out of scope, that type of thing. So they said, no, it doesn't work. We want everybody talking to everybody. We want working software is more important than documenting the damn software. Right? And I'd rather have something that works than something that's written about it. I'd rather have customer collaboration over negotiating a contract. I would rather have responding to change. So when people came up to me and asked for new requirements, respond to that, pivot if I need to, than to follow a plan. It doesn't mean the things on the right are not important. Those things oftentimes need to be done. They need to be done in varying levels. But they're saying that those other things are more important to them. Okay? So in Agile methodology, basically you're talking about iterative development with iterative planning, dynamic requirements, adaptive teams, quickly deployable products, continuous review, and a lot more communication. Continuous communication. This is why it was small teams and co-located, if you can do. Which is can't always do, but you try to do. So then they went back and said, okay, so we had the manifesto, now we're going to develop principles. And they have like a whole bunch of principles. Satisfy the client. Early and continuous delivery. That's an important part. Get it out there. Get it out there often. Welcome changing requirements. This is important too, because most people in the old days, they didn't like the requirements to change. We tried everything we could do to make a client not change a requirement. There are a lot of developers today that still don't like that. But we were doing this. What are they asking for that for? Because that's what we're doing. It's their software. It's not ours. We'd like to, we feel we get closer and closer to our baby, which is our software, but it's not ours. It's theirs. They get to do that. We want to deliver it often, because there's a whole lot of good reasons for that. You have to work with the business. You have to. If you're not working with them, you're not doing Agile. You want to be able to build motivated teams. And a big, big, big portion of Agile was also the fact that we don't want to burn you guys out. We don't want everybody to be working 80 hours a week over the weekends, never going on vacation, never talking to your significant other, never having a significant other. We don't want that to happen, right? Because when you do that, people move on.
You run out of engineers.
You run out of engineers, yeah. Pretty damn quickly. People get in a huff and walk out on you. And then you're screwed, by the way. So you want to build motivated teams that actually have some sort of balance. Do a lot of face-to-face communication in one way or another. Sometimes the face-to-face is on, as you saw, like Zoom or Hangouts or Skype or whatever handy. Working software is your primary means of progress. If it's not working, you haven't progressed. If you can't show me something, I don't know if you did anything. And you're going, but sometimes it takes a long time to get something out there that works. But if you don't get something out maybe that works in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, you're never going to get anything out to me to see. So you have to get stuff out there that works often. It needs to be sustainable, so you want to get to a constant pace. It reduces, if you can do things at a constant pace, it's sort of one of those things that mechanical engineers will teach you. The people that learn how to do, one of the guys I worked with who was really good at dealing with mechanical and product lines, where things went through manufacturing product lines. What?
You're talking about assembly lines or something? Assembly line.
Assembly lines?
Assembly line types of things, yeah. When you're building something, if you push it through too fast, you'll end up screwing things up. If you push it through too slow, you're not ever going to get it done. But if you find this nice, good, constant sort of speed, you can actually get a hell of a lot more done. Why is that? And he used to show it to me, or it's sort of like pushing a rope. What happens when you push a rope? Things get screwed up at this end, right? And how many of you have watched the Lucille Ball with the chocolates? Oh, it's really old. Okay. Go out to YouTube and Lucille Ball Chocolate Factory, where she's working at the chocolate factory and boxing up the chocolates. And the assembly line goes faster and faster, and she's throwing the chocolates in her mouth and over her shoulders and, and so it's all going awry, and think of how much they screwed up at the end, right? But if you had it going in a nice, good line, speed, consistent, she would have had boxes of chocolates. So it's important, be sustainable. Get a constant, sustainable pace. That's why we're so interested in velocity. Be really, continuous attention to excellence in design. Simplify. Maximize the work not done. Do that. In this class, other classes, you want to do the work that's important to get the A, and don't do the work that's not going to help. So figure out what that is, and of course, that's the hard part, is figuring out what that work is, but maximize what's important, and don't do the stuff that's not. Okay? Get self-organizing teams, so you want your teams, each one of them to be able to lead, each one to be able to follow, which is really tough, and then make sure that the team is constantly reflecting and fixing their errors, fixing the way that they work. So the Scrum model, which is a management technique for Agile, it's not itself a software development methodology, it's a management technique. So this is how we manage them. And we have things like sprint planning meetings, daily Scrum meetings, sprint review meetings, and so that we have a bunch of stuff that we do to manage this cycle of development. And we'll talk more about how that happens and how you estimate them and how we come up with a prioritized backlog. We're actually going to play games that will do that somewhere down, a few weeks out from here, because that will actually talk about how we put together a backlog, how we estimate them, how do we do that. Because that's not easy, by the way. I don't know how many of you have done it, but it's trying to figure out how you slice it to make it actually work right and deliver, do continuous delivery is not all that easy, and particularly when you're starting up a new product. Okay. So issues that you can run into, though, in Agile, the scalability. There's no real design phase. There's no real architecture phase. There's, and so how do you scale it? How do you get it to be able to be scaled, for it to be big? How do you, the skill of the software developers is important. Everybody needs to be trained. It's more important to be trained in a lightweight methodology such as Agile than it is to be trained in Waterfall, because I can take out a book and tell you how to do Waterfall. You can pick up the book and read it. It's not a big deal. But in Agile, everybody has to work together. Everybody has to take over. Everybody has to control. Everybody has to estimate. Everybody has to test. Everybody has to do all these things. That takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of training to know how to make it work. The ability of the client to express their needs. Clients don't understand Agile, mainly. It takes them a while to figure it out. Oh, I don't have to say it all up front. I can stop when I want to. They can get to the point where I have to listen to you about technical debt. It takes them a while to figure it out too. And it's very hard. And if you're only working with them for short periods of time, sometimes they never learn. And you need to plan for reuse of the code. It's easy in Agile to say, I'm just getting this thing out. I'm getting, six sprints done, and then it's done. And I'm not thinking about reuse. But what if you want to do something that's similar? What if you want to do it again? How do you go back and reuse that stuff? And that's really important to make sure that you're actually thinking about it as you go along. You never know. You probably are going to reuse it. Best kind of projects, less than 10 developers. You have to have your client involved in it, and you want to get out frequent delivery of capabilities. I want to get stuff out quickly, start making money off of it, and build on it. Right? Prototyping involves building a mock-up of the system, or some part of it. And often you do it to show a user interface, or you do it to test out a technical issue or an idea. Generally, you should throw it away. It's not a process model. It's something that you do to actually show something off. If you can't use prototyping, a lot of people start coding because they want to code, and I'm prototyping, man. But what does it do? They aren't really designing. They aren't really doing the required. They aren't doing all the things that you need to do. And oftentimes, it's enough to show an idea, but you really don't want to implement it. So how's the difference between prototyping versus evolutionary? Because they're so kind of both testing out an idea. Well, the prototyping is really just to figure out how to do something, and to get it out there. And then you usually throw it away. Evolutionary, you're actually going out to gain more knowledge, evolve the solution, and you're hoping to keep it. So you're putting more time into the analysis and the evaluation and the design and everything than you're doing in the prototyping. So when you're managing a prototype, don't use it for, hey man, I just want to code, types of projects, or get it out there. Make sure you set the time frame, make sure you set your objectives, and make sure that you know whether you're going to reuse it or you're going to throw it away. If you're going to reuse it, treat it more like evolutionary. Spend more time at thinking about it when you do it. If you're going to throw it away, get something out. That's what you're trying to do. The thing that this room doesn't have is a clock, so you guys will have to keep me honest. So when you're building a prototype, keep the knowledge gained. Don't use the code unless you really, really put a lot of effort into fixing it. When you're building evolutionary, keep the knowledge gained. You keep the code. When you're building with Agile or incremental, you're doing all of it. You're actually getting stuff out for delivery. Okay. So techniques for Agile, used for Agile. There are a whole bunch of techniques that we use when we do Agile. There's just not Scrum. There's everything from Kanban, RUP is Agile, DSDM, RAD, Crystal, FDD, function-driven. We use for analysis, we use use cases, or we use user stories, or we use scenarios. Agile for design, we'll use UX methodologies, or we'll use UML. But there's a whole lot of types of techniques that you can use when you do Agile. Scrum is one of those types of methodologies to use to manage it. Oftentimes you'll see Kanban as a piece of the Scrum or the Agile methodology when you use it. How many of you know what Kanban is? Have used Kanban?
Like a Chinese
To-do
word.
lists.
Is that a Chinese word?
What?
Is Kanban a Chinese word?
It's kind of like a Chinese,
Word?
it's a Chinese word, or Japanese.
Okay, I know that.
Yeah. But it's basically, it's a to-do list where you do coming up, in process, done. And then broken down into any level you want to. An easy, simple Kanban sort of board that you can use today for free is Trello.
Oh.
I don't know, Trello I use for sort of keeping, things for my house, like fixes I need to do on my house on a board. So I know these are the things that I need to get done, these are the things that are in process getting done, and these are the things that have already been done. And I can then archive those off, and I can go back later and say, oh yeah, I did that in this year. But Kanban is often used when you do another methodology. Some of the other extreme or Agile techniques are sort of continuous integration, continuous deployment, and continuous testing, as well as DevOps. What's the difference between those? Can anybody tell me? You always say. Go ahead. So the two of you are always talking, so I'm going to have to spread out some. But go ahead.
I have used this thing, so I thought I might just answer it. So basically, what continuous integration means is that every time you make changes to the code, we build it straight away. We run all the test cases so that if somebody made a mistake, we know it straight away instead of running a build at the end of the day. So basically, continuous means every time there is a change that goes in the system, we know straight away whether it was correct or not. Deployment, I haven't really used deployment, but I guess what it would mean is that every time we make a change, it should get deployed in the main production or whatever we are running, so that we know basically whether the system is in good state or not, rather than doing something and then finding out 3 days later whether something broke or not. And I think continuous testing is basically involved in integration, which means that run all the test cases every time you make changes.
Who knows software that or things that you use probably every day that's doing continuous deployment? Well, they deploy every week. Seems continuous. And major ones every less than that, something. Twitter, Google, Facebook, they're continually, Rally I don't know if they still are, now that they've been bought. But they're continually deploying, which means first you do continuous. Can you do continuous deployment without continuous integration or continuous testing? No. So you're continually, whenever you make some code, you integrate it, you test it, you integrate it, you test the integration, you deploy it. And so you might have multiple deployments of your coding every day for these different products, for a lot of these web companies out there. And so things are never the same. And we don't notice it most of the time, right? But it's continually happening. One of the other things that, for example, Google does is, and Facebook, is continuous, what's continuous testing in a different way. They'll pick out a set of clients that get a certain feature or function and see how you react to it. So I remember when they first released the Google Scribble Doodle for your birthday. You know how when it's your birthday they put the happy birthday to you up there on the doodle thing? I was one of the first to actually get that. And I was like, told everybody. And they're like, I didn't get one of those. It's like, well, it's way cool. It's my birthday. It's like, I don't know why I got, why it was me, but I must have been, the 1,000th person or something. But they do that, and they see if people respond well, and they send it to other people. And look at this, and if that type of response, put it in. Give it to everybody. If it's like, oh, crap, don't do this anymore, they pull it out and don't give it to everybody. So there are a lot of things that happen that go by that you don't really know that they're testing you all the time for whether it's a feature or function to do.
Isn't it called A/B testing? This whole process of like making changes.
Yeah, A/B testing. Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, that's A/B testing.
So I noticed sometimes the GitHub repository has some build success status on their repository. So is that continuous integration or continuous deployment?
If they do what?
They do the auto building, like the
auto building.
You see if this.
That's integration generally. Deployment is when you release it to your client. Deploy it immediately. And then DevOps, where DevOps fits in here is that you don't have to do these other things. But DevOps is basically taking the developers and they're doing operations as well. So there's no longer throwing it over the fence of the developers to the operators. Production environment, I don't have to worry about it because it's out in the production environment. It's not mine anymore. No, it is. It's yours. You own it. So here's more about continuous integration. It came with extreme programming, which is commonly known as XP. And it's integrated and committed often. Keeps it from being diverged. Keeps developers talking to each other. Because if you're all committing code all the time, it can run into each other a lot, right? So if you don't want to break the code, if you don't want to wear the beanie hat, propeller hat, because you broke the code, you're going to be talking to people so that you don't screw up their code and their code doesn't screw up yours. Everybody's always working with the latest version, and you get compatibility problems early. Yeah, this is sort of the reason the beanie hat was that I had friends that worked at Microsoft, and they not only had to wear a beanie hat, one of the propeller hats, which really is not very flattering, by the way. You had to be the one that was responsible for the build until someone else broke it. Think of how much that motivates you for not breaking the build, right? But if you're doing it continuous, now you don't have to, it's done all the time after everything, so there's less of that worry of constantly having to break it, right? And you can use that with any methodology. It doesn't have to be used with Agile. It can be used with Waterfall. Continuous integration can be just done. So, but a lot of times the deployment today, sometimes people do it in Waterfall. They don't do it until it's completely developed. We aren't going to deploy it. We do Agile. We sort of do a Waterfall deployment. Nothing really gets deployed until we're done. even though our client's seeing it all as we go along, we're demoing it, nothing really gets put out there until we're done with X amount. There's also deployment landscapes, business as usual, hot fixing, there's 5 a.m. release. I used to do a lot of those. Damn it. Do it at 5 a.m. We do it over the weekend, though. You do it at 5 a.m. on Saturday morning, so you had the whole weekend to fix it because it was going to break. It's not going to work. Merge hell, string freeze. Called it a lot of things, but always hell. Continuous deployment and delivery, it's really did originate with Agile and Lean. And it really makes a lot of sense for releasing software and strategy on the operations side. If you release a whole lot of little bitty things rather than these huge, big, pent-up things, it's easier on the people using it, because I don't even notice a lot of the changes as they roll by, right? Used to be when they rolled out the big stuff, oh my God, they moved everything. And you don't know, people don't know how to use it. You have to retrain them. It's big issues, on out there. Oh, we have problems with it working with the different browsers or whatever it is. If you're constantly releasing it, you find that out quickly, fix it, and get it back out there again. Because it's all little stuff or littler stuff. Fast delivery, high quality, but you have to do a lot of build, test, and deployment automation. Nice little diagram from Wikipedia about continuous delivery for what it kind of looks like. Pros and cons, they also call it deployment or delivery. Pros, you can revert quickly if you do a continuous deployment if you need it, because it's small things. If you're always doing it continuously, it's a bunch of small stuff, right? You fix it and integrate it continuously. Early warning if there's problems. Constant availability of the current build for demo. Frequent release. Cons, it takes a lot of work to get to the point where you can do continuous deployment. A lot of training, a lot of setup of machines, a lot of testing, a lot of, it takes a lot of work to get there. And you need a lot of process around how do you know when to pull back? How do you quickly revert code base if you need to? What do you do if you find out there's an error? But sometimes it's really hard to remain agile when you're doing that. Continuous testing, talk about verification and validation. Does anybody know the difference between verification and validation? They spelled differently.
Verification is your testing to make sure that what you've built is actually working correctly, and validation is tested against the requirement to see that what you intended to build is what you actually ended up building.
That's right. So am I building the right thing, and am I building it right? Okay. So you want to make sure with your client all the way along, are you building the right thing? Or am I wasting a lot of time building something that they don't want? And then once I've decided or determined what is it that I want to build, what the right thing to build is, then you make sure that the quality, that it's built right. Okay? And there's a couple of, as you can see, it's even been cited so you can get to the right definitions for it. So verification will take traceability and reviews and prototyping, all of those types of things. Validation is more like doing system testing, operational testing, demonstration to your clients to make sure that you've got the right stuff. One of the reasons that you're doing verification and validations all along is because of how much it costs to fix a software defect. How many of you guys have seen this or talked about this or heard about this before? If I find it in the requirements, and you'll see Barry Boehm, he's a rock star. You'll see him show up over and over and over again in my slides, okay? Barry Boehm, cool guy. He's got really cool stuff. Anyway, Barry Boehm was the first one to sort of put this sort of thing together. And if you find your error when you're doing requirements, if I sit down and you say to me, I want something that does this, and I go, okay, I hear you that you want this, is that right? If I got it wrong, how hard is that to fix? At that point, not very much, because you say, no, you misunderstood me. What I said was this, right? So if I can fix it in requirements, it's not a problem. Fix it in design, that's 5 times the problem of fixing it in requirements. Coding, 10 times. In the dev, it's sort of like, if you're getting out there in development, it's like 20 times. If I'm not getting out into like testing and all that, it's 50 times. And if I get it out to ops, if I've thrown it over to production and find that same bug, it's about 150 times or more, depending upon what types of issues it arises when I've thrown that bug out there. If I lost that $40 billion, or whatever it was, $400 million for Tesla, it's a hell of a lot more than 150 times if I'd found it back here, right? So, if you look at the cost of requirements changes, this is one reason we've gone to iterative or incremental sort of methodologies, because when you do it as a waterfall, this is one of the issues with waterfall, when you do your analysis first and then design and implementation, testing and support, if I change a requirement and I do it in analysis, not a big deal. If I do it in support, big deal. So again, if you get them in smaller sprints and do it right along, it costs you less to make those changes. It's not free. It still costs you. If you are 4 sprints in and they make a big change or pivot with the software, it's not free or easy to make some of those changes, but it's a whole lot cheaper than waiting 6 months or a year in figuring out that, oh, well, the software is unusable, or we need to change the whole thing. So this is, again, the cost for the priority. If you've got a low priority requirement, cost to change it is usually minimal. This is another Dr. Obvious sort of slide, Captain Obvious slide. If it's a low priority requirement, it's often really cheap to fix. If it's a high, priority feature, it probably is expensive. Request types. Some of these are kind of interesting. And did you realize, look at that, a GUI to fix is not a big deal. Why? It's usually like changes to, well, it can be a big deal, but it's not as big a deal as many of the rest of the things. Why? Because it's often like change the color, change the, put more boxes on it, or whatever it is, right? If it's functionality, it takes more. Process, it takes a lot more because I'm changing the way people are doing things. However, and that GUI and functionality together is about as bad as process. I always found this one interesting. GUI and process together is the same as GUI and less than process. I'm not quite sure I can answer why.
Kind of like user experience.
I think it's why you're experiencing it while you do it, and so it's easier than the process behind the scenes in the code. I think you're right. But I find it interesting, and you kind of want to find out what the hell are they talking about. And I should go back and read that article fully to figure out what they're, but I couldn't figure it out the first time through. I have to read it again. So, continuous testing is automated testing that's running continuously in the background. Yay! So when it's really, really important if you're doing any of the continuous integration or continuous deployment. Okay, so there was discussion, which we'll come back to DevOps, like I said, is sort of it used to be you'd throw the development over to operations or to production, make them do it. There was always a wall of confusion. What the hell are you giving me? Why does it work this way? What am I going to do with it? So there's this is actually a little, I think it is. It should have been a video. Yeah. Okay. If you click on it, there's a cute little video about why DevOps. Okay, out on YouTube. So to go out and look at it. And it does that because I put that video in, I guess. But here's sort of the benefits of DevOps teams. So if you have traditional IT versus the yellow is the DevOps, if you look at it, you can deploy changes quicker. You've automated repetitive tasks, so that means it's less onerous on us. Okay, stop. Look at communications. Communications has improved radically. There's less firefighting. Now your overhead is up, though. So there's a lot more socializing, brainstorming, daydreaming, and procrastinating, by the way. But if you release software, and you do it in traditional, and you look at, so we're going to say in minutes, traditional IT would be 85 minutes, DevOps is only about 36 minutes, about half, less than half the time, a third of the time, approximately a third. So it takes a lot. Okay, this is why you don't automate your slides. Because they go by too fast. Well, maybe that's good. Anyway, it increases your efficiency, less weight. There's a lot of reasons why to do DevOps. Go and look at that cute little slideshow. It's, or cute little thing. It's being done more and more and more in large companies that are delivering software. So it's a good type of area to look into and know more about. If you're going to go out and manage it, you'll be managing it from life, from beginning through delivery and that deployment. Okay? Okay. So, take 5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes. Let's assume you decided to sabotage a project you're working on during its planning phase. Make a list of the most potent things you can do to foul things up. Assume you don't care if you're going to get fired. Okay? So, what could you do to sabotage a project during the planning phase? Yeah?
Screw up the scope of the project. I mean, let's say you started off as a website, but then you started thinking, oh, let's do the app also at the same time, and then, completely misallocating the resources and not even getting to the objective.
So, misscope it, basically. Tell them it's either bigger than it's going to be, or it's smaller than it's going to be, or it's going to be a different sort of functionality or something like that.
Really want to sabotage it.
Yeah. So, yeah. What else can you do to sabotage it during planning phase?
Requirements.
Change the requirements?
Just keep it vague, the requirements.
Keep the requirements really vague? Okay.
Say anything that makes it into anything that makes it through like development and deployment. So keeping requirements vague in a way that means that it has to eventually be fixed in production. So it's like the most expensive, like you said.
Yeah. Make everybody don't explain yourself when they ask questions. Well, it's easy.
Yeah.
Why don't you know what that is? Just do it. What would you do?
Just not make sure the relationships between each part of the software aren't apparent, like knowing what touches what.
That'd be a good way to really screw it up. Yeah. What would you do?
Delete important parts.
Oh, you would delete an important part. Or so not talk about one whole area of planning at all. Just ignore it. Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
If I were like a developer, overcommit myself on work to the project manager.
Yeah. So tell them it wouldn't. It's I don't know. It'd take a few days, but it's going to actually take days and days and days.
Or like sign up for like 5 projects, or 5 things to do, and you really only have time to do 2 of them.
Yeah. You could do that. What else would you do?
Maybe the number of resources you have. You say that I need a very few resources, whereas actually you need a lot. You need maybe in terms of people or other resources which are what we.
Forget you need a database.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you do to screw it up? Have you seen any of these things when you were working? Have you seen, not people meaning to really screw it up, but any of these things happening where it did screw it up? So a bunch of disjointed ideas? Yeah. For a proof of concept? Yeah.
They just use the intern to do the planning phase to see whether their idea is good.
There you are. Use an intern to do the planning phase. That could screw it up, yeah. Not do anything about the business, right? No, don't care. I don't care about what the business does. Right? Could help screw it up. There are a lot of things that we say here that actually happen in business that people do unintentionally. Some of them unintentionally, but a lot of it's done unintentionally. A lot of people like to overcommit because they feel like heroes. You know, they feel like they're really cool. You know, sure, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that too. And they don't do it to screw you up. They do it with all good intentions. These are things that you need to sort of look for. You know, and the whole vague requirements, a lot of people that just happens a lot, you know. One of the things we'll talk about as we go on, to be an expert. How many of you ever watched the commercial about Peyton Manning when he talks about, it's for the healthcare company, talks about how many hours it takes to become an expert? It's like 10,000 hours to become an expert. How many hours are in a year? For working hours in a year. If you work for a consulting company, you know this. 2080. It's without your vacations taken out or anything. So 2080. So how many years does it take to become an expert? 5 years. If you're doing it full time, every day, 365 days a year, it takes 10 years. Why is it that, you know, people that become great quarterbacks, like play, go out and every day, right? It's the way you become. You may have a propensity to be good, but you have to do it a lot. So we screw up things without meaning to because we are not as expert as we like to be. But one of the other things that happens is that experts have a hard time, once they get to be an expert, they have a hard time explaining how to do something. Explain to somebody how to walk. Tell them exactly what to do to walk. You know, and if they had their things on their eyes and a blindfold and whatever, and you had to explain it without showing them, it's hard. Okay, put your foot down and your heel first, and then, you know, you rock to your toe. Oh, wait a minute, don't pick up that back foot. You know, whatever. It's hard to tell people how to do things when it's second nature to you. Ask a lot of people about why, you know, ask a doctor about why they say, oh, this is a problem. It's a gut feel. They've seen so many of them, it's a gut feel. There's something wrong here, you know. So that's moms with their kids. It's a gut feel. They've been my kid for 10 years. I know when they're sick. So it takes a long time to get there, but we have people that don't have all that many years in that are actually working with us, including ourselves. So things happen that easily mess things up. Okay, that's enough. You guys have a good week. Remember, next week, and I'll have it on the D2L, next week, you didn't catch this, you're over in Vasadasan's class, which is right across the courtyard if you go out straight out these doors, there are doors across the courtyard, and it's 1B41. Is that the alarm saying it's time? Yeah, ECCE 1B41. It'll be up on the website. And it's Dr. Vasa Dasan, D-A-S-A-N. And his class will come join us sometime later on. But remember this, and like I said, I'll have it up on the website on the notes to remind everybody. Also, the panel discussion should be up soon. So for people to rewatch, or for those of you that didn't get to see it, to watch. Yes, sir.